you find yourself with a quiet suspicion that your life has been shaped by forces you could not name, woven by hands you never saw, yet somehow familiar to the deepest part of you. When you hear the word wound, something in you responds like an ancient bell being struck. It echoes through forgotten corridors, stirring fragments of a childhood you rarely revisit. A version of you that learned to protect itself, a sensitivity that was never chosen, but slowly formed through experience. You might call yourself an empath now. But for a long time, you were simply someone who felt too much, saw too deeply, and carried it in silence. And with that came a story, a past that feels fixed, defined, already written. But what if I told you that your past hasn't actually happened in the way you think it has? Today, we are going to collapse your rigid timeline and transmute your heaviest burdens into neutral energy. By treating your history as a malleable frequency rather than a fixed archive, you can begin to rewrite the internal code of your life. We have been taught for centuries that the world exists independently of us, a solid stage where everything is already set. That time moves in one direction, that the past is a closed vault of facts we can never touch again. But what if that certainty is only a distortion in perception? What if memory is not a fixed record, but something fluid, something that exists in a kind of suspended state, waiting to be interpreted? Because both ancient Hermetic teachings and modern physics point toward the same unsettling idea. The past is not as solid as it seems. Through the Hermetic principle of mentalism, we begin to see that what we call memory is not a permanent structure, but a field of potential, something that can shift depending on how it is observed. And that changes everything. It means the trauma you carry is not a permanent mark. It means you are not bound to a script you never agreed to. It means your history is not a prison, but a frequency that can be tuned, reseen, and transformed. To understand this, we turn to a book that quietly preserved this knowledge, the Kybalion, published in 1908. Its authors, known as the Three Initiates, condense the teachings attributed to Hermes Trismegistus into 7 principles, keys that describe the underlying laws of reality across the physical, mental, and spiritual planes. Today, we are going to use one of those keys to explore what we can call liquid time, showing you exactly how observation can reshape old wounds into power, and to see, in the simplest and most direct way, how this shift can begin to change the weight of your past until what once held you in place becomes something you can finally move through. The foundation of all Hermetic wisdom is the principle of mentalism. The all is mind, the universe is mental. This principle embodies the truth that the substantial reality underlying all outward manifestations, the material universe, the phenomena of life, matter, and energy, is actually spirit. And spirit can be thought of as an universal, infinite, living mind. If the universe is mental, then everything within it, including time and trauma, is a mental creation. This means your experience of the world is not a neutral reflection of objective facts. It is an experience arising within a vast, interconnected field of awareness. As the philosopher Thomas Nagel suggested, consciousness includes a subjective aspect, the qualia, which is the what it is like experience. The taste of a fruit, the sound of a bird, or the sting of a childhood memory are not external objects, but experiences created by the mind. Therefore, your trauma is a habit of the mind. Before humans existed, a rock was just an amorphous mass of vibrating atoms. It only became a rock because the mind trained itself to label it as such. In the same way, your old wounds are mental constructs made solid by your repetitive focus and the labels you have attached to them. Because the universe is mental transmutation, the art of changing and transforming mental states, must also be the art of changing the conditions of the universe itself. When you change the nature of your thoughts, and alter your vibratory state, you are not just thinking positive. You are shifting the very fabric of your reality. Modern science is finally catching up to these ancient Hermetic axioms through the study of quantum physics. In the subatomic realm, particles behave in ways that defy common sense. One of the most mind-boggling concepts in quantum physics is the idea that particles can exist in multiple states simultaneously, a state of superposition or a blur of potential. They haven't quite made up their minds what they want to be. However, the moment we try to observe these particles, they suddenly choose a definite state. The act of observation forces them to make a decision, to collapse from a cloud of possibilities into a single concrete reality. This is the observer effect. It means that awareness is not outside the process. It is part of what gives form to what we experience. Consider the experience described by Carl Jung. He noticed that when someone carries a strong inner expectation, especially fear, it doesn't just stay inside. It begins to shape how they interpret events, how they react, and even the situations they find themselves in. Over time, the outer world starts to mirror that inner state so precisely that it feels almost arranged. So the question becomes, are we only reacting to reality or quietly organizing it through the way we see it? Philosopher and psychologist William James described a simple example to illustrate this. He spoke about a person walking into a room full of people while carrying the quiet assumption that others don't like them. Because of that expectation, they become slightly tense, reserved, and guarded. Their tone changes. Their body language closes. Others, picking up on this, respond with distance or indifference. And so, the original assumption appears confirmed, not because it was true to begin with, but because the way it was observed shaped the outcome. This is the quantum playground, where the lines between mind and matter blur. Now apply this to your trauma. If the past is mental, it exists in a state of superposition, a cloud of potential memories. As long as you observe your history from a state of hypervigilance, you continue to collapse those liquid potentials into the same solid trauma. You are the architect of your own reality, but for most of your life, you have been building the same prison. To heal, you must learn to master the lens through which you view the world, for the world is a reflection of your own consciousness. The most radical aspect of this teaching is that time is liquid. It is not a strict progression of cause to effect. There is scientific evidence that the future can influence the past, a phenomenon called retroactive influence. In a famous study conducted by Professor Darrell Bem at Cornell University, students were tested on their ability to predict which of two curtains on a computer screen hid an image. In the experiment, participants were shown two curtains and asked to choose one, guessing where an image would appear. Only after their choice was made did the computer randomly decide where the image would actually be placed. In some trials, the hidden images were emotionally intense, in others, completely neutral. The results showed a statistically significant tendency for participants to choose the correct curtain more often than chance would predict, as if their decision was influenced by an outcome that had not yet occurred. Even more astounding is a 2001 study on the power of prayer. People were asked to pray for 2,000 patients who had suffered from bloodstream infections. The group that was prayed for showed significantly shorter hospital stays and shorter periods of fever. But here is the secret. The people who were praying didn't know that they were praying for patients in the past who had had infections between 1990 and 1996. Their prayers transcended time and affected outcomes up to 10 years in the past. This proves that your timeline is malleable. Your thoughts right now can travel backward in time and affect your past. If you can send a healing signal from your current state of awareness back to that trembling child sitting in the forest of your memory, you are not just comforting a memory, you are influencing the past itself. As the Indian monk Nagarjuna stated, if the existence of the present depends on the past, then the present must also be in the past. In the extended now, focusing on the present moment elongates time perception, allowing you to reach across the liquid fabric of existence to the places that need healing most. To heal your past, you must use the Hermetic principle of polarity. Everything is dual, everything has poles, everything has its pair of opposites. Like and unlike are the same. Opposites are identical in nature, but different in degree. Heat and cold are not different things. They are simply different degrees of the same vibratory phenomenon on a thermometer. Light and darkness are the same. They are just varying degrees of the presence of light. In the same way, trauma and healing are the two poles of the same emotional wavelength. The worst you feel can be matched by the best you can feel. Mental transmutation, or mental alchemy, is the art of changing your vibrations from one degree to another, from pole to pole. If you are currently polarized in fear, the Hermetic formula is not to fight the fear, but to concentrate on the opposite pole, courage. If you wish to eliminate a negative quality, you focus on the positive pole of that same quality, and the vibrations will gradually shift. You don't shovel darkness out of a room, you simply turn on the light. For the empath, this means shifting the polarity of your sensitivity. For years, you were hyper-attuned to others' moods because it was a survival necessity. You were the peace bringer or caretaker because you learned to silence your own needs. This is the wounded healer archetype, tending to others because you haven't learned to tend to yourself. Your awakening is the moment you move to the opposite pole, the sovereign empath. You no longer feel responsible for fixing others' emotional storms. You become the anchor of your own truth. You move from the me pole of the personality to the I am pole of the higher self. Trauma recovery often feels like a pendulum swing. You feel better for a while, and then the old wounds pull you back into depression or anxiety. This is the principle of rhythm. Everything flows out and in. Everything has its tides. All things rise and fall. The pendulum swing manifests in everything. When you are caught in a PTSD fear response, your perception of time can accelerate or slow down dramatically, a phenomenon known as altered subjective time perception under stress. Seconds feel like minutes, and the world seems to move in slow motion as your brain processes threat-based information with higher resolution. You are literally stretching the duration of your pain through the intensity of your focus. The Hermetic masters don't try to stop the pendulum, for the law of rhythm is indestructible. Instead, they apply the law of neutralization. They understand that while the pendulum must swing on the lower mental plane, they can mentally ascend to a higher plane of consciousness. By polarizing yourself in your higher self, or the I am, you allow the swing of the mental pendulum to pass beneath you without affecting your consciousness. You become the skilled swimmer who can turn this way and that, rather than the log that is carried away by the current. In practical terms, this means that instead of getting pulled into the intensity of the fear, you gently shift your attention outward, toward your breath, the sensation of your feet on the ground, or the simple act of naming what is physically present in the room. Even a small shift like this interrupts the narrowing of attention and begins to restore a sense of stability. To master this neutralization, we must examine the internal structure of our consciousness through the lens of mental gender. This seventh Hermetic principle states that gender is in everything. Everything has its masculine and feminine principles. On the mental plane, this manifests as the duality of the I and the me. The me is the mental womb, the part of you that contains thoughts, habits, emotions, and those old wounds. It is the feminine principle, which is always in the direction of receiving impressions. Most empaths live almost entirely in their me consciousness. Because your childhood required you to be hyper-aware of your environment, your me became a vessel for the emotions and expectations of others. You absorbed the seed thoughts of volatile parents or a hostile world, and they grew into your own identity. The I, however, is the masculine principle, the will. It is the part of you that stands apart, witnesses the operations of the me, and has the power to project energy, to initiate mental creation. For many, the I has remained inactive, allowing the me to be ruled by the wills and suggestions of others. Healing trauma through conscious observation means activating the I. When you stand in the authority of the I, you no longer are the emotion. You are the one observing the emotion in the me. This separation allows you to refuse the impressions that don't belong to you. You stop being a shadow and echo of others and start being a sovereign creator. The I provides the banks for the river of your empathy, giving it form, direction, and purpose. Does the body really respond to this mental hacking of time? In a 2023 Harvard study, researchers caused minor bruising on participants' forearms. They then had them sit in rooms where the clocks were set to run at half speed, normal speed, or double speed. The actual time that passed was exactly 28 minutes in every case. The results were shocking. Those who thought more time had passed because of the fast clock healed twice as fast as the others. Their bodies responded to their mental perception of time, not the objective ticking of the universe. In 1981, another Harvard study by Ellen Langer took men in their 70s and placed them in an environment designed to look like 1959. They were told to be the people they were 22 years earlier, watching 1959 TV and discussing the news of that era. After only 5 days, their eyesight improved, their arthritis diminished, and they physically looked younger. Your body goes along for the ride with your mind. If you can consciously shift your perception to a timeline where you are already healed, your biological reality has no choice but to follow. This is the Hermetic principle of correspondence in action. As above, so below. As within, so without. When the mental landscape changes, the physical landscape must eventually align. Every cause has its effect. Every effect has its cause. Everything happens according to law. For most of us, we live as effects of the world. We are carried along by environment, heredity, and the suggestions of others, moving like pawns on the chessboard of life. Trauma is a powerful cause that dictates a life of predictable effects, repetitive relationships, chronic anxiety, and self-sabotage. However, the Hermetic masters understand the art of rising above the ordinary plane of cause and effect. By mentally rising to a higher plane of consciousness, they become causes instead of effects. They help to play the game of life instead of being played and moved about by other wills. To heal trauma is to refuse to be a pawn of your history. It means recognizing that the wants and pleases you feel are often just the result of external suggestions or internal moods you haven't yet mastered. When you awaken, you start to will to will. You use your own conscious free will to respond to a situation rather than reacting from an automated state of unconsciousness. By shifting the way you react to any response or stimulus, you transcend the karmic thread of your past. Finally, we arrive at the gravity method. Since we were young, we have been programmed to believe that to achieve anything, including healing, we must struggle, fight, and exert endless effort. We are taught that the universe is a chaotic void where we must carve out our happiness through sheer force. But what if this effort is the very reason you are stuck? Think of gravity. When you drop a stone, you possess an unspoken, absolute certainty that it will fall. You don't doubt the outcome. You don't stress over whether you are worthy of gravity. You simply let go and allow the invisible mechanics of the cosmos to take over. Manifestation and healing should be exactly like dropping that stone. Effort is often a symptom of doubt. When you are trying to heal, you are broadcasting a signal of lack, a signal of desperation that the universe only responds to with more lack. But the universe is a mirror, not a machine. It responds to what you are, not what you want. The gravity method is about flipping the switch from the off position of lack to the on position of infinite potential. It means assuming the emotional posture of the person who has already healed. You step into the frequency of absolute certainty and preemptive gratitude. This signals to the quantum field that the event has already occurred. Just as the gravitational pull effortlessly draws the stone to the earth, your authentic emotional resonance magnetically draws your desired future into your present moment. The great physicist John Wheeler introduced the concept of the participatory universe. He proved that reality doesn't exist in a fixed physical state until a conscious observer interacts with it. You are not a spectator watching the movie of your life. Your very awareness is what projects the movie onto the screen. Consciousness is the ink in the pen rather than a ghostly spectator hovering over reality. This means your trauma is not an objective fact that happened to you. It is a story that your consciousness has been telling, and the universe has had no choice but to obey that story. If you change the story, if you change the lens through which you observe your past, the universe must reconfigure itself to match your new mental state. Many who experience a deep spiritual awakening report the realization that they are alone in the world. Not in a lonely sense, but in the recognition that there is no external reality independent of their perception. You are the center of reality from your own vantage point, and your consciousness is the backdrop against which all experiences unfold. As you awaken and use these hermetic tools, you will notice a shedding of the old self. You may outgrow relationships that once felt central to your identity. You may find yourself uninterested in the emotional dramas that once pulled you in. This isn't coldness, it's clarity. It's the moment the empath grows from water to stone, not in rigidity, but in foundation. A profound shift occurs, the return of instinct. Many empaths lose touch with their instincts because their childhood required them to monitor others rather than their own inner orientation. But as you awaken, your body begins to give you signals again. You feel a tightening when something is off. You feel a calm when something aligns. Instinct is the language of the soul, and reconnecting with it is how you reconnect with your destiny. Your destiny is not predetermined. It is shaped by the degree to which you are willing to awaken. Your old wounds wrote the first chapters of your story, but your awakening gives you the pen. You begin to write from truth rather than trauma, from inner alignment rather than fear. Your old wounds created the empath, but your awakening will rewrite who you become. You are no longer the child who survived. You are the adult who chooses. The empath who remains unconscious is defined by their wounds. The empath who awakens is defined by their awareness. You have the master key. You know that the universe is mental. You know that your observation collapses your reality. You know that time is liquid, and your intentions can reach back to save the child you once were. You know how to polarize yourself in the I am and rise above the pendulum of pain. Stop fighting the phantom battles of the ego. The circumstances you are facing today are merely the delayed echoes of your past thoughts. They are old news. Today, you are the ink in the pen. You are not a single, isolated drop of water fighting against the tide. You are the entire boundless ocean, contained within a single drop. Take a deep breath. Trust the flawless mechanics of the universe. Polarize yourself in your sovereignty. Reclaim your authority, and simply flip the switch. Your new reality is ready when you are. And if you're still here, still listening, thank you. It truly means a lot. Feel free to share your thoughts, reflections, or practices in the comments. This space can become a quiet exchange of insight and encouragement. Thank you for being here, and thank you for listening.